Welcome to Driving Change, the By Miles podcast series. If you've not heard of us before, we are pioneering pay-by-mile car insurance. If you're not a car insurance nerd, don't worry. This podcast isn't really about that. And especially this time round, where we're going to be talking about the future of driving and the implications of automation. And with me to discuss this is Kirsty, Head of Product. Thanks for coming back.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Absolutely no problem. And in previous episodes, we've been discussing about the falling mileages of drivers. And I guess as technology is accelerating at the rate it is, we could be looking at a future where those mileages done by people are dropping even more by automated cars. I guess the best place to start is kind of what automation actually means, and I guess what automation actually means today, because we've not really got cars out there self-driving at the moment, have we?
No, it's absolutely a spectrum at the moment. And I think, when we talk about automated cars or autonomous vehicles, people think chitty bang bang, people think like Google Waymo or a car that's not got a steering wheel. And I think it's important to say that it's really a spectrum. And if you talk about automation in cars right now, it's really just kind of any features where the driver is getting a bit of help through automation. And it's really commonplace. So if you think about, cruise control, speed limiters, lane assist, all of these are connected sort of safety features. And actually, by 2026, every new car that's being made in the UK will have some kind of connected capability. So it's really, really widespread.
Yeah, it feels like it's a future that we can see, and it feels like it's something we've been able to see for a very long time. Just the thought of going into a car and just going from A to B with not touching the steering wheel or anything like that. But it sounds further away than we might think. But the things you talk about, cruise control and speed limit, things like that, that's not relatively new. I mean, there's some of those kind of things have been in cars for 10 years or so. But I guess what in between where we are now and to what we call this level 5 kind of automation, I mean, what kind of things are we, I guess, waiting for? What kind of things do we need to see before we get to that point?
So in terms of the actual features available, I mean, there's a huge array, and it just depends which car manufacturer are kind of focusing on different ones. But I think one of the biggest changes that we'll see, and we are seeing, is more in like the regulatory space. So if you think about how fast car technology is advancing, I'd say it's actually the regulation that is struggling to keep up.
Right.
So there've been recent changes to the highway code, for example, to just try and make sense of how to regulate these safety features, these automated safety features, and self-driving. And actually, there's been changes quite recently to talk about where sort of liability would sit if you have an accident while you've got some of these modes enabled on your car.
Yeah, so this is something we just kind of discussing before we kind of got on air. Is kind of the risk element and the liability element of it. So if you're in cruise control or you're using a manufacturer-based setting on that, the liability kind of shifts from the driver to the manufacturer. Is that right?
Yeah, and that's a really interesting point. So I guess it's worth saying it's not all safety features. It's only certain self-driving modes. But yeah, there are certain self-driving modes where if there was an accident when that was activated, the liability for paying out that claim would not sit with the individual. It would sit with the manufacturer.
Right.
Which is a complete shift, right?
Yeah.
In how, if you think about the impact of that on insurance, for example, that means as an insurer, I could theoretically price that portion of risk at zero. And actually something that By Miles are experimenting with kind of planning and trialing at the moment is doing just that. So it's looking at if you are driving part of a journey and we know that you've got one of these features enabled, we can reduce your premium, your insurance premium for that portion of the journey. So it's something that we're kind of planning and trialing at the moment.
Wow.
Yeah, and that's really could be transformational because we could be offering kind of immediate discounts based on safe driving behaviours.
Yeah. What kind of sample size are you working with them? And how
it's very much it's very much in trial at the moment.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So well, when in kind of putting this risk back onto the manufacturers, it sounds like in order to get to that end point we were talking about, kind of the driverless cars, if we're talking about that is the end point for it, there's a lot of risk these manufacturers kind of got to get through in order to get to that point where they're saying, right, we're going to put a car out there that's got all these kind of features on it, but it's on us if they don't work as well as they should, or there's any kind of issues whatsoever. So it's a waiting game almost to get to that point trust-wise with them.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely a while away before that is widespread as behaviour. And I think, one of the biggest things that we're facing right now is the fact that, despite the fact that, so many new vehicles are being built with some level of connected features, there is still kind of a widespread reluctance among customers and drivers, I guess, to trust these features.
Yeah.
So, 1 in 3 people who have, connected speed limiters, for example, actually use them. So it's really, I think it won't be too long before we get to this point where there's this kind of tipping point gear shift where the majority of people start to feel there's enough penetration, I guess, of this connected technology that people start to trust it en masse and enable it. But right now there's still almost a mental hurdle for us to get over. However, if you look at the stats, like 85% of accidents that happen are due to human error.
Yeah. I was going to speak about the trust fees because I think I'm not quite sure how far away we are actually from that point where people are willing to. It's such a habitual thing, isn't it? We're having your hands on the steering wheel, your feet doing the pedals. I mean, even kind of an automatic kind of takes that away. There's a certain element of it. It's like, right, I'm kind of trusting this part of it. To then actually, because I'm not saying not having a steering wheel, but actually the cruise control, the lane assist, all that kind of stuff, you're giving away less and less of that habitual thing for it all. It's, like you say, kind of how far away this tipping point is going to be before people are actually like, okay, and it becomes the norm for it all. Do you see a future where every driver, every time someone goes into a vehicle, they'll be using automated features, or do you think people will retain an element of control in some way, shape, or form?
Yeah, I mean, there are different views on this. Mine is that I don't think we're necessarily going to have a future where all cars don't have steering wheels, for example. Because some people love, for the joy of it, just love driving.
Isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, I get to a country road, and then I just enjoy driving.
Yeah.
But I think, maybe I'm stuck in a traffic jam, late for work. Would I rather sit in this traffic jam with my hands on the wheel, or would I rather check my emails and let people know I'm running late? And I think it's then, it's that kind of spectrum, and it's all about just giving people the choice and flexibility and letting people opt into using this advanced technology rather than forcing them to use it.
Yeah.
It's about gradually earning the trust. And I think actually, car manufacturers have got to work really, really hard to do that, because if there are any accidents, horrible accidents, when due to some of these features going wrong, the kind of level of expectation to which they are held is going to be so much higher than, a human.
Yeah.
And so it should be. So
car insurance is always going to be a thing. It's, even if it's not drivers who are driving the cars, car insurance isn't going to be a pointless thing. There's still going to be, an element of cover that is required. It's just the liability aspect of it.
Really, the thing for car insurance is that we have to, I think it's about offering a service that is much smarter and more proactive than current car insurance. So if you think about traditional car insurance, it's entirely reactive. So, I fill in a question form, I answer a load of questions, and then based on lots of historical data that's nothing to do with me, it's how people who on paper have answered in a similar way to me have driven and claimed in the past.
Yeah.
That is the price I'm returned. And that's just what I deal with until renewal, when again, you go through the same rigmarole.
Yeah.
But and telematics was sort of an answer to that, to try and be slightly more individualized, slightly more proactive, but fundamentally it's still very reactive and not personalized at all. Whereas what we're trying at By Miles is to introduce interactive insurance. It's really about creating this ongoing dialogue with our drivers and our members, where we can say, look, if we send you a nudge, if we send you a tip on how to drive more safely, maybe it's a journey that you're planning, you've used our app, you've used our journey planner feature, you said, oh, how much would it cost me to go from A to B? If we know that you're planning to do that, on a journey that actually you could do more safely on motorway, or you're looking at driving at a time when we think there's going to be bad weather conditions, or a time of day maybe where it's going to be busier and therefore the risk might be higher, we could send you, a message saying, oh, by the way, if you did this journey 20 minutes later, it would be less risky. And actually, this is where the price thing comes in. And actually in future, what we'll be looking to do is offer a kind of real-time discount for that, to really incentivize people towards safer driving.
Yeah.
And that's how insurance can really change the adoption of this technology and proactively accelerate it.
With the liability changing, kind of more to manufacturers, the more automatic and autonomous vehicles get, where do you think the onus would lie on the insurance? Would it lie on the individual to insure their own vehicle, or will the manufacturers have to kind of step in and arrange part of that themselves, or is it kind of too early to tell, do you think?
I think it's too early to tell. I think there are many ways you could cut it as a car insurer. And I think the most important thing is all the new insurance propositions that are being developed are kind of leading the regulation in the interest of the customer and are really flexible, really personalizable, so that people can, choose from a whole menu of different insurance propositions to the one that's just enough coverage for what I need, but nothing more. Because we're still in this industry where, there's not that much choice, and you often have to pay for something which actually you're not going to use. Whereas if, usage-based insurance, for example, you pay for the miles you actually drive, and it's just a much fairer way of doing it. But people expect that level of flexibility going forward, and that will be the same whether the proposition is developed by the manufacturer or developed by the insurer.
I was just going to ask about that. With this, could you see car manufacturers entering the insurance space, almost kind of offering their own products and things around that, based because they sound like the liability is on them. So why wouldn't they kind of step in and offer new kind of products in that way? Is that something you could see?
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess, to speak personally, what we've noticed at By Miles is that our relationships with the car manufacturers is becoming much more direct. So at By Miles, for example, we have partnered with a range of 13 major car manufacturers, such as Ford, Mercedes, to set up kind of pay-by-mile policies without the need for any sort of physical device in the car, just using the connected capability to read the mileage directly from the car. Whereas in the past, we might have been more likely to have to go through a third-party software provider, for example. We're building these direct relationships between insurers and car manufacturers. And so absolutely, I think that's in the interest of the customer. Because it's all in one place. And it's also in the interest of the insurer, because, the brand that people really love is maybe the car brand. If I'm, a huge Mercedes fan, then if I can get Mercedes pay-by-mile insurance that's really fair, really flexible, it makes sense.
Absolutely. So it's a collaborative kind of joint venture again with the manufacturers.
Yeah, and we've really focused on getting as seamless a customer experience as possible. So, when we've been building mobile app journeys to, for example, connect your By Miles policy to activate it and connect it to your Mercedes Me account, that's, all one sort of smooth app journey. You're not going into multiple apps, and it's just about, making it really, really easy and feel like you're not doing anything difficult.
Just seamless.
Yeah.
there's a lot of connectivity in cars, and we've talked about the kind of lane assist and things like that. But there's Internet of Things in most cars now. I think I was sat in the future where nearly every car will have some kind of connectivity in there, so people have got internet availability on their apps, things like that. Could you see a future where these apps are kind of talking to each other and around safety? So you talked about notifications and things like that. So if your Fitbit or smartwatch saw that you only had like 2 hours sleep or something like that, and you got behind the wheel of a car, it would say, "Oh no, you've only had 2 hours sleep. I'm not going to turn on for you," something like that. I mean, could you see that happening? Where would you kind of draw the line on that kind of, I guess, morally?
Yeah, ethics comes into it, absolutely, and that's the challenge. It's really, navigating that with compassion and nuance, and making sure that nobody is harmed through that sharing of data. And sharing of data should absolutely always be in the interest of safety and the interest of the customer experience. But absolutely, there's really interesting data that you could look at. So, say I looked at your Spotify, or Android Automotive, Apple CarPlay, where you've got this dashboard with all of your apps together on your on your car. Could you have some sort of nudge showing up on there saying, "Oh, why don't you play some piano
sees you driving recklessly, so starts putting some Beethoven in this one."
Yeah, or "Are you sleepy? You've been driving for a while. Here's a
Megadeth." It turns the volume up for you.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. Yeah, so, I mean, I guess as an insurer, you would like to know that information if it's available to you. If the Fitbit said they've only had 2 hours of sleep, but I guess there's an ethical line in terms of what information is available. But I guess you just don't take.
Yeah, there is. I think it's all about consent, and it's all about opting in, and transparency with how you're using that data. I mean, it's a huge thing at the moment, isn't it? With medical data and health insurance, for example. There's so much data being captured, but what is ethical to share and to use, to price on, or to maybe validate or invalidate a claim? And I think that's going to have to be really nuanced case by case, and I think there's going to have to really be probably additional regulation to make sure that people's data is being treated, really.
And like that ties into what you're saying, the being about the regulation, trying to be aware of everything and catch up to things and adapt to the rate of technology.
Oh, totally. I mean, look at the US of the overturning of Roe v. Wade, and then if you look at some of these kind of for example, menstrual tracking apps, and the amount of data personal data that's collected in those apps that then could possibly, one world be used against people. Yeah. There's a huge amount of responsibility to companies that are using data. But I guess, looking at the Internet of Things and, for example, home insurance, there's huge opportunities, right? So if you think about some of the smart tech that you've got in your home, you've got flood detectors, sensors, cameras, all of that. You can link that to the price of home insurance. Again, there's so much you can incentivize really safe behaviour, or you could.
There are benefits to be had from it, of course. Yeah.
Yeah. So actually, any sort of technology that can impact risk and help people make safer choices really can be harnessed for insurance, and insurance should use that data, but it should use it ethically.
It's a fine line, yeah.
Yeah.
So we were talking about people driving less on previous episodes, and even in this one. So it seems even if we're not going to go to completely driverless cars, the actual driving people do, certainly from a official insurance point of view, it will continue to go lower.
I think that is where we're going. I would hope that's where we're going.
See, it's going to be a thing then.
I think so. I think that's where all the signs are kind of pointing. But it should absolutely, because that's in line with fairness. That's in line with how, for example, we charge by the mile. And if you're, absolutely. Otherwise, you're subsidising the drivers who are driving really, really high mileage. And as a low mileage driver, it should be usage based. And I don't think that's far away at all.
No. You say ultra vehicles didn't pay road tax. Was there a specific reason for that?
I think, there are certain EV incentive schemes, and I think these are popular. I think they're likely to continue, honestly. And and you can see it, for example, in the tolls that are applied through congestion charge, through ULEZ. It's not even just that people are being incentivized to drive electric vehicles. You're starting to get really heavily penalized if you're driving, a diesel car, for example, within an ultra low emission zone. So yeah, absolutely. I think that is where the regulation is leading us, but you have to do it kind of slowly and sensitively, especially, with the cost of living crisis at the moment. You can't force everybody to buy a new car. People have what car they have. So.
Yeah. It sounds like the legislation and the support around EVs and things like that has been gathering a bit of pace and momentum over the last few years. It just kind of needs to be there for the automation aspect of it, and kind of switch on and catch up to the technology, really, because the rate of change, what are things going to look like in a few years' time?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, if you think about it, so many more people are starting to drive these cars with connected capability, and actually by 2030, we think that 1 in every 5 miles driven is likely to be automated.
Well, that sounds really far away, but it's not. Oh,
no, 2030. Yeah. We're not talking this way, so we're not talking flying cars.
No, this isn't Blade Runner, 100 years from now. Wow.
Yeah.
So it's definitely coming, and there's a lot to think about there.
Yeah.
I think it's a lot of legislation and responsibility for the government and the authorities to kind of make it fairer in the way that I guess we can see with car insurance, things like that. Well, that's all we have time for, Kirsty. Thank you very much indeed.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Well, that's it. There's more insights you can get on the By Miles website, on the magazine on there at bymiles.co.uk. You can tell us what you think on Twitter, Facebook and LinkedIn. That's at GoByMiles. And if you're on Instagram as well, it's at GoByMiles. But until next time, drive safe, drive smart and drive change.